There's certain things you learn about growing up as a kid through many different avenues, be it academics through the school system or life lessons through a personal friend or a family member. We all have a particular way of finding out more about life as we go along. One of those major ways can be through cartoons. Many of us have managed to gain some type of lesson from one of our favorite characters in animation, either from a Warner Brothers cartoon or a Disney cartoon or, Cat Dog if you're connected that well to it. This medium allows us to learn different life lessons that we probably couldn't learn through a more conventional means. For kids, I think it's important that they're able to gain some knowledge through these avenues. But there's one life lesson I think is pretty vital for kids growing up, and that being having to deal with death. It's something that kids are going to have to deal with eventually. It's not something you could pussyfoot around for too long, because that can be detrimental to them later because they're not mentally prepared for it at all. Now, of course, a lot of kids will have their parents or guardians to tell them about this stuff, but I think in some cases, even parents might not know how to tackle this issue for their kids. That's where I think cartoons come into play. For children, cartoons can be an easy way for them to consume certain subject matters. Death is no exception. It's something kids are going to have to face in their life, and it's better they get a proper education on the matter somehow. The one thing I'm thankful for that we see in media is a lot of cartoons actually do touch on this subject by having the characters deal with it in their own way. Sometimes they'll tackle it in a manner that's more of a soft approach but still gets the message across, or it can be a bit more bold and upfront about it. Now, the former can usually be with the passing of a pet. Some episodes dealing with death have the characters find out that their pet passed away. Sometimes they could go about it with the character being in denial about the situation. A good example of this is Casagrande's when Sid's sister Adelaide's pet frog died, but it was during the time of Dios de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead, and Sid and Ronnie Ann didn't want to leave Sid upset, so they just tell her that the frog will come visit on that day, not realizing how Day of the Dead actually works with it just being more of a celebration of the dead. Now, of course, by the end, Adelaide finds out the truth of Dios de los Muertos and is told that the frog isn't coming back, but the episode does act a bit as a cautionary tale about why you shouldn't lie to kids on this front and be real with them.
You see, on this day, we think about our loved ones, and that keeps their memories alive. So even if we don't see them, they're still with us.
I do feel like Froggy is here.
Can't treat kids like they're stupid, especially on this type of thing. Another episode that deals with the loss of a pet is Craig of the Creek, called The Sunflower. It mainly revolves around this little girl whose pet bird dies while she's playing with the gang. The biggest thing of note for this episode is that it's about coping with the loss and allowing yourself time. In the episode, we see Kelsey be very familiar with losing a pet and knowing how to cope with all these distractions and such, but not getting that her friend just needs her time to mourn her loss.
Cookie loved sunflower seeds. I'm sorry I got upset with you. Losing someone is hard. And I remembered all the things that had helped me, but I forgot it also takes time.
It's a big lesson to kids, telling them that this pain is gonna be with you, but you're gonna adjust with time. Now, granted, these are mainly for grieving for pets, which is important, but not everyone can relate. But thankfully, there are episodes that deal with losing either a family member or even a friend. It's pretty imperative that kids learn about what it could be like to lose someone that close to you. Now, of course, this topic can be avoided on a lot of shows or movies, either because it wouldn't make sense to have it in the show or movie, or it just wouldn't be handled right. But when it's done, it's usually done pretty effectively. Now, sometimes these things can be tackled in a very fantasy-based way that can show off many different ways to handle grief. I'm talking, of course, of Steven Universe. Now, there's so many characters that have to deal with the loss of Rose Quartz, so detailing them all would take forever. But nonetheless, this show itself handles a bunch of the characters coming to terms with the loss of Rose, that it shows off all the ways to tackle grief. Some characters tackle it in a mature manner by hiding away the pain. Others handle it in a more childish manner that's not healthy and can even be destructive. But the greatest thing is that all the characters that grieve have someone there to let them know that they're not alone and have people around who care, which I think is a great message.
Everything I ever did, I did for her. Now she's gone, but I'm still here. Sometimes I wonder if she can see me through your eyes. What would she think of me now?
Well, I think you're pretty great.
even with them also pointing out that they all grieve for the same person and they have each other. There's even an episode of As Told by Ginger that has Hoodsy's grandmother pass away, but he doesn't really know how to feel about it. He didn't connect with her too much, so he wasn't too inclined to feel sad about it. But once he starts remembering some times with his grandmother, he starts to see she was a nice person.
Maybe Nana was just trying to share junk with Dodie and me, so that we'd remember her better after she went to that great big bingo hall in the sky. I know I'll never look at blue foam or a raisin and not remember how Nana used to laugh at me and pinch my cheek really hard.
Sometimes for kids, they don't have a connection with a family member, so they may not really have much of a processing period until they think of some times they've had with that family member. Another major unique case of grieving was Harvey Beaks. Damn you, Nickelodeon, for taking this from us!
You bastards!
But that's neither here nor there. In the episode Later Dingus, a friend of Fee, who we actually got to know earlier in the series, ended up passing away the next day after they were just hanging out. A thing of note was that they had a commonality of pulling pranks on people and even each other. This comes into play because Fee ends up thinking that her friend is just pulling another prank. Everyone tries to tell her what really happened, but she doesn't buy it. She keeps living in denial. That is, until his actual funeral. There, she finally learns the truth and just breaks down. She comes to grip with it by the end and gives him his proper send-off. In her own unique way.
Good golly, what is that?
The episode mostly is about being able to accept when you've lost someone near and dear to you. These type of episodes even showcase why children should be made aware of death so they can deal with it properly versus not accepting the cruel reality of it. Fee was too busy being in denial, so once she found out, it ended up hurting her more, especially since she made a fool out of herself at her own friend's funeral. I'm also reminded of this very good episode of Static Shock one time, where Static got a chance to go back into the past and save his mom from dying. Static tried as hard as he can to keep his mother alive, but in the end, she tells him she has to do her job as a paramedic, even if it means the worst is meant to happen to her.
The co-workers on the scene that night saying it, all she kept talking about was how proud of you she was. She kept calling you her superhero. I don't know why, but if she could have seen how you have grown, I swear she'd be even more proud.
Now, obviously this isn't a real situation that can happen, but it is a strong lesson in letting the past go and moving on. Some young kids could probably think there could be a way to bring their loved ones back, but there just isn't, and you have to learn to live with it. Death is a part of life, and you can't really live much of a life if you don't learn to live with it. There's been a significant number of ways where cartoons handle coping. You can get stuff like Batman staying with a child that's on the verge of death.
I'm dying very soon.
Yes. I'm sorry.
Could you stay with me? I'm scared.
Or Chucky Finster from Rugrats being told about his mom and being told of all the great memories she left behind, teaching kids that just because that loved one is gone doesn't mean they should be forgotten.
This was her trowel. It's a little shovel for gardening. All those flowers, she planted those. She used to love to come out here and play with you.
It's all right, Chucky. Don't be scared.
These shows try to give a proper means of teaching kids about this heavy subject that is vital for them to learn. I always believe death is something that can never be avoided no matter what. Hiding it away from children can only hurt them later in the long run. It's important they have some means to cope with it once it ends up happening to someone they know or care about. Cartoons are usually an easy access for kids to consume, so them learning from there can be one of the best ways for them to understand the severity of it. And you know what? I'm honestly curious. What are some episodes that you all remember tackling coping with death as you were growing up as a kid? Were there any that helped you through the loss of a loved one or helped you learn to cope with the loss? Let me know in the comments. And just remember, it's just a thought.